And that's the end of the first half. As the teams head to the locker room, the Spartans lead the Bulldogs by a score.
You guys stink. Geez, Coach, we're only down a couple of points. No, I mean you guys really smell. You need to hit the showers. And here, I got every one of you new bars of soap from the Sterling Soap Company. Each bar is artisan crafted using natural ingredients and essential oils. They also have shave soaps, colognes, beard balm, and a whole lot more. Now get in there. But Coach, we have another half to play. I don't care. I can't stand to be around you.
A few minutes later.
All right, bring it in tight. You guys are still playing terrible, but you're smelling great out there. Now listen, you're going to need to stock up for the rest of the season. We got a lot of tough games left. So go to sterlingsoap.com after the game. That's STIRLING soap.com. You got that? Yes, Coach? Great. Sterlingsoap.com on 3. 1, 2, 3. Sterlingsoap.com.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
Hello, sports fans, and welcome to another edition of Yesterday's Sports on the Sports History Network. Today's guest is author Jack Bethel, and Jack's latest book is titled Decades Across Redondo. And I have read the book. Jack was kind enough to send me a copy. I enjoyed it very much. Very entertaining book, very well written. And welcome to the show, Jack.
Thank you, Mark. It's a privilege to be here. I'm very honored. So excited. This is certainly a part of NFL history that is very, very important. And, thank you for all the work you guys are doing to preserve it.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us. And so tell us a little about the book and what inspired you to write it.
Well, I've written a lot of books about different subjects, but I've always had sort of a thought in the back of my head that I would like to do a little bit of a tribute and all the books I write on different subjects, just as a broad way of looking at it, I like to capture the essence of humanity in every situation that I can. So when I write to see how, where is the human element in everything. And certainly sports captures so much of the triumph and despair of defeat, and it's a full range of human expression, a full range of human experience. And I thought so many of the fans of football today may not remember the earliest days of the Super Bowl era. And it was certainly set in one of the most explosive periods in American history, the 1960s. There was just so many things happening. And I thought, let's kind of set this up, and to add to it, it didn't want it to be straight history. I wanted it to be seen through the eyes of, men who are sharing these experiences. And, a bar is a great place for people to come together and share that moment of triumph. And I wanted to set it in Los Angeles. LA is sort of my adopted hometown, and there's just so much sports history in Los Angeles, so that's where I situated the book.
Right. Well, in reading the book, you really bring the characters to life. There was times in the book where I even, I was wondering, are these characters actually made up, or are they real? Because they make them so real and lifelike that you don't feel like you're reading a fiction.
Well, yeah, thank you for that. I wanted the characters to be as real as I can make it, so I tried to invest each one of them with slightly different characters,
right?
Flaws, personalities, and just we see moments where we get to see them, having a good time, and other times where they behave like human beings. I'm thinking in particular where Dom, the owner of the bar, has a falling out with his best friend,
right,
over a perception that, he didn't understand. And, human beings that happens. Right. But it was so much fun to write these characters in different situations, whether it was in LA or whether those trips they make to Las Vegas or the trip to Tijuana for the bachelor party. So there are a
Right.
lot of things. And I'm sure if I did a deep dive, I might find parts of my personality in each of the characters, but they were all made up out of thin air. None of them is based on really anything that I can think of. They were all just creations to fit the book.
Right. Well, you did a great job with it, and all of them were sports fans. All the guys would gather around at the bar, and every year they'd have a Super Bowl party, and so it was really, I liked the way that it wasn't just about sports. It was about the friendships and like you say, there was so many historical things happening during that time.
Did you like the super blowouts every year?
Yes, that
They're
was
each slightly different.
yes, that was enjoyable. And you also have some. I didn't get to listen to too many of them, but I think I listened to maybe 4 or 5. You have some podcasts on a variety of topics.
Yeah, so if the listeners go to jackbethel.com, they'll find a background on each of the 4 books that I've published. Got a 5th one in editing now, but if you check the menu, there is an item called 1 Minute Wednesday, and I've been doing about 2.5 years of these, and each of the 1 Minute Wednesdays are rarely 1 minute. They're usually 1 to 2 minutes about something related to the books. So there's a lot about some of the other books I've written, but also a lot of sports pieces. So I just finished, I think, a 7 1 Minute Wednesday schedule on Super Bowl III, and how monumental that was. But there's little pieces, and you can see me talking about different things that are important, as well as things I'm interested in. So
Right.
there's a lot of travel, because I think travel will feature in a future book. And so, yeah, thank you for pointing that out. A lot of good stuff at 1 Minute Wednesday and jackbethel.com.
Yes, I highly recommend that the listeners check that out, because there is a variety of topics. And, we spoke a little bit a few days before this, and you say that you moved around a lot when you were a kid. Your father was a military man. Do I have that correct?
Yeah, thank you for yeah. So my father was in the Marine Corps.
Right.
The Marine Corps is, a mobile service. There are no Marine bases in the northern part of the United States. It's a very coastal-oriented service, so you find bases mostly on the East Coast, West Coast. I think there may be a couple interior ones, but for the most part, they're overseas, Hawaii or Japan. But we lived both in California, Virginia, Hawaii, lived overseas for 3 years as a kid in the Dominican Republic. So we moved quite a bit, and I'm sure that has influenced the way I write books.
Right. Okay. So you say you went to you went to college in Los Angeles. Was that a 4-year college?
Oh, yes. So I was very blessed to attend USC in Los Angeles.
Uh-huh.
And, USC used to be good at football.
Oh, yeah.
Not so much of late, but who knows? Might recover someday. But so I was very blessed to attend USC, and I did that on a naval ROTC scholarship. So the Navy paid for me to go to college, and then I spent 5 years on active duty with the Navy, and then stayed in the reserves and just retired a few years ago. So I'm very grateful to the United States for my education and my experience.
Oh, right. Well, we're grateful to you for serving. Thank you. Okay, so from the time that you spent in L.A. and living in California, you became a Dodgers fan and a Lakers fan, but you say you weren't really a Rams fan.
You had to bring that. So As a kid growing up in Los Angeles, off and on, obviously I become a Dodger fan, Laker fan, USC fan. As a kid, so this is 5-year-old kids don't make decisions rationally,
Right.
and I just had a hard time embracing that helmet that the Rams had. I did that Ram curlicue on it was sort of like. So don't blame me. I love the Rams. I think they're an extraordinary franchise with a remarkable history. But I became a Charger fan. I love the lightning bolt, and I loved San Diego. Lived there a number of years. But if you're going to write a book in Los Angeles about the rich sports history there,
Right.
as well as celebrities, Hollywood, surfing, the horse racing, just all the multitude of things that you can do in Los Angeles, you have to write about the Rams. So,
Right.
I had to do a lot of research on the Rams and their rich history, but that's how I ended up choosing them as the subject. And they're not the only one. As you read the book,
Yep.
there's just a whole host of other sports in there.
Right. Yes, there is. A lot about the Lakers and the Well, before we get to the LA teams, we'll just do a little quick history on your team, the San Diego Chargers. And I guess some people don't realize that they were a charter member of the AFL, began in 1960, and their first year was in Los Angeles. And they actually went to the AFL championship game that first year, but they lost to the Houston Oilers. Then the following year they moved to San Diego and made it to the championship game again, where they again lost to the Houston Oilers. So I guess you were probably a little too young to remember that. What year were you born?
57.
Okay, so probably a little too young to remember those years. But then, for some reason, I don't know what the reason was. I'd like to look into it. The following season, 1962, they all of a sudden became an awful team. They only had 4 wins and 10 losses. And then the following year, they went back to being a great team again. They went 11 wins and 3 losses and beat the Boston Patriots 51-10 to capture the AFL championship. And
They're only AFL championship.
That's right. That was their only championship. I don't know. Were you old enough to remember that team at all?
No, we were living in Hawaii at that point, so
Oh,
probably we weren't getting the same kind of media coverage.
No,
that you can
definitely
get
not.
today virtually everywhere.
Okay, so then, they did have some very good teams in those early years. 1964, 1965. Again, they were, they're always in the AFL championship game in those early years. 64, they lost to Buffalo. 65, they lost to Buffalo again. And then from 1966 to 1969, they had winning records, but did not make it to the postseason. And then they had a pretty long spell of losing. From 1970 to 1976, they had nothing but losing seasons. But you mentioned when we were speaking the other day that like in the late 70s, 1977, they went to 7-7. 1978, they went to 9-7, and now we're getting into the Dan Fouts and Don Coryell era, which you spoke about the other day. You have any memories of that team?
Yeah, so it's interesting that the paths of the Arizona Cardinals and the San Diego/LA Chargers cross paths. I think that the ownership of the Cardinals had a falling out with Don Coryell in the mid-'70s after he had resurrected the franchise.
Right.
Took him to the playoff, I believe, 3 out of 4 years, and
Yes.
he leaves St. Louis. He's out of football for a year.
Yep.
Goes to San Diego, and within a year, he's got him back to the playoffs, and they had a nice run throughout the late 70s, early 80s. But
That's right. I wanted to.
so I would say,
Yep.
yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say those 70s teams, early 80s teams throughout the 80s, the Dan Fouts era,
Yes.
that was an extraordinary football team. I'm not sure why they weren't able to ever cobble together the type of defense that they needed to go with that offense, because it seemed like that offense scored so fast in so many instances that the defense barely had time to sit down before they were back on the field.
Yep.
So I think sometimes that speed of scoring may have hurt them a little bit.
Could be. They had 3 years in a row where they went to the postseason. 1979, they lost to the Houston Oilers in the playoffs. And then the next 2 years, they were only one game away from going to the Super Bowl. 1980, they lost the AFC Championship game to the Oakland Raiders. 1981, they lost the AFC Championship game to the Cincinnati Bengals, and that may have been their best team, that 1981 team. But you remember, I'm sure, that was the game where it was, I think the wind chill factor was 50 degrees below zero.
Mm-hmm.
And that definitely affected their passing game.
Yeah. I think in particular, the 79 game was the one that always sticks out. I think they played Houston.
Yep.
And Houston that year was missing Earl Campbell, and I think their quarterback, Dan
Pastorini.
Pastorini. But somebody on the Houston Oilers sidelines had recognized a signal that was being used to flash certain plays into the game.
Wow.
And they were able to get their coverage exactly right. And they picked Dan Fouts off, I believe, 4 times in that game.
Yeah.
So it was the best team. I think they had only one loss that year, and they lose in the first round of the playoffs. So that was really hard to swallow. We didn't obviously know any of that till much later.
Yeah. Well, that was, from that point on, they kind of went downhill. But I wanted to backtrack a little because you mentioned that the other day when we were speaking, your first Chargers game that you were able to attend was in 1969, and that was against the Jets.
Yeah, so that was I think it was 69. Might have been 68. But it was an amazing game from the standpoint of that. I think everybody knew who Joe Namath was at that point.
Right.
And when he came onto the field, even as, the San Diego fans, there was all this kind of noise in the background, and people were paying attention because he had this facial hair. I forget what it was called. I think a Fu Manchu.
Yeah, the Fu
Like
Manchu. Yeah.
The very interesting facial hair, and we were all like just chattering away about it. And he just had that effect. He had a very charismatic personality, even when he'd come on the field without his helmet on.
That's right.
And you're watching him. And I'm not old enough to recognize behavior, but I'm sure he had an effect on the fans. But
yeah,
he was just had that charisma about him that drew everybody to watching what was going on. And the Jets, to their credit, played really well, and I think they ended up beating the Chargers fairly comfortably that day.
Okay.
But it was my first time ever at an NFL game or a professional football game.
Right. Okay, so after they lose that game to the Bengals, where that was very similar to the famous Ice Bowl game with the Packers and Cowboys. After that, they kind of fall off the map. Not really much success until 1994. What do you remember about that team that went to the Super Bowl against the 49ers?
Yeah, so good question. That was the only team that made it to the Super Bowl, and it's ironic that the Chargers have had two extraordinary quarterbacks, three if you count Drew Brees for the short period of time he was in San Diego before they went with Phillip Rivers. But, two prolific passers in Fouts and Rivers, and they couldn't get to the Super Bowl. The guy who got him there was this sort of journeyman guy named Stan Humphries.
Right.
And I don't even know where he is today, but Stan Humphries, engineered this season for the ages in San Diego, and they were actually for a period of time calling it Stan Diego.
Right.
In reference to him. So everybody embraced him, and they got to the Super Bowl by pulling off a massive upset in Pittsburgh. I remember watching that, and they had Pittsburgh had I think 2 or 3 plays down on the goal line, and they just couldn't get the ball in the end zone. And it was just this, it lit off. I was watching the game, just lit off this explosive roar of joy because you finally were getting to do something. Go to the I think sometimes in baseball they call the major leagues the show. Well, right. I was always thinking the Super Bowl is the show.
Yeah.
And they get to go to the Super Bowl, and you're leaping about. Now, I think we came back down to reality fairly quickly when we realized who we were going to be playing in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And it mostly turned into a tune-up game for the 49ers. That game was over by the end of the first quarter, if I recall.
Yeah,
It was still an electric year.
Yes, it was. So we'll switch over now to, let's see. I got to look at my notes here. I don't really, I guess I never really thought about it until I started doing a little research of just how many sports teams, professional sports teams, are in California. It's amazing. I can't even keep track of them all. Even the Oakland Raiders from 1982 to 1994 were they were the Los Angeles Raiders. And they won a Super Bowl in 1983 as the Los Angeles Raiders. Do you have any, I guess you weren't really a Raiders fan at all, but do you have any recollection of that team in 1983?
Yeah, I remember them only because I was back east at a 2-week school or 3-week school with the Navy, and I had to watch the game in the officers club.
Right.
And almost everybody back east was a big Washington fan.
Yeah.
And the Raiders absolutely obliterated Washington. It was just a rough game, but I think that was I want to say Marcus Allen's first year.
Yep.
And, obviously being an SC guy, I was pulling for him too. And I think that team was just very, very good. It was kind of surprising they weren't able to repeat, after that. They kind of fell off the cliff, not long after that. They were competitive, but
right.
Never really got back to the Super Bowl. But it was a great season. And I'm not a Raiders guy, obviously, because I'm a Charger fan.
Right.
But Los Angeles, similar to New York, is blessed to have 8, 2 teams in each of the leagues. So 2 NHL teams, 2 NBA teams, 2 NFL teams, and 2 Major League Baseball teams. So very similar to New York in a lot of ways. But that Raiders team was really, really good. I do remember that.
Yep. And then we have the Angels in baseball started out in Los Angeles. Their first joined the league in 1961, and they spent their first 4 seasons in L.A. before becoming the California Angels. 1965 to 1996, they were the California Angels. Never really had much success. Maybe their best team was 1986 when they lost to the Red Sox. Looked like maybe they were going to go to the World Series, but they lost to the Red Sox. And then they became the Anaheim Angels. I call them the team that couldn't decide where they wanted to play. They went from Los Angeles, California, Anaheim. Oh, then they finally won the World Series when they were the Anaheim Angels in 2002. Then they became the Los Angeles of Anaheim Angels. And then now they're back to being where they started, the Los Angeles Angels. So this team seemed like they could never decide what they wanted to name their team. They represented Los Angeles, California, Anaheim, and now they're back to Los Angeles where they started. Not really much winning, not a long history of winning for the Angels. You were mainly Yep, go ahead.
I think you hit it on the head, and I think part of the Angels' struggle is finding an identity.
Right.
The shadow that the Dodgers cast, that big blue shadow, is so large that it probably makes it difficult for someone else to find some sort of traction or personality. But
Right.
Angels were better in the 90s and early 2000s, that's for sure. They have struggled of late.
Yeah.
They had 2 of the best players in the history of the game go through there, I think.
That's right. Rod Carew and Nolan Ryan, right?
I think Mike Trout recently.
Mike Trout.
Too. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
they've had some good players.
But LA is. It's funny. I talked to my brother and his family. His wife is from upstate New York, and he tells me when he talks to my sister-in-law's brothers that there's a very definite. I don't want to say pecking order, but you would never, if you're a Giants guy, you would never root for the Jets or even tolerate the Jets. If you're a Yankees fan, the Mets are, to be disdained. And if you're a, Knicks fan, you would never put up with the Nets, right, and so forth. And I think LA is like that to a certain extent. The traditionally older franchises, the Rams, Dodgers, Lakers, and to a certain extent, Kings in hockey. I don't follow hockey a lot closely, but
right.
Other than I couldn't even tell you. I think the Ducks have won a Stanley Cup, but I'm not as familiar with hockey.
Yeah,
I think the Angels had to get around that shadow the Dodgers have cast.
Oh yeah,
across the Southland.
Well, speaking of the Dodgers, we could go over a little bit of their history. Of course, they spent a lot of years in Brooklyn, and actually their first World Series in 1916, which they lost to the Red Sox, and then again in 1920, they went to the World Series and lost to the Cleveland Indians. They weren't even actually called the Dodgers yet. They were called the Brooklyn Robins. And then, of course, for, all those years, 1941, they lost to the Yankees in the World Series. 1947, lost to the Yankees. 1949, they lost to the Yankees. 1952, 1953. So five times playing the Yankees in the World Series, lost all 5. Finally beat the Yankees in 1955. Right? Yeah, they finally beat them in 1955. And then the following year, the Yankees beat them again. But then, 1958, they moved to L.A., and, that seemed to be the right move, because ever since they moved to L.A., they've won a lot. They won the following year, 1959, they won the World Series. 1963, they swept the Yankees in the World Series. 1965, they beat the Twins in the World Series. And on and on. I mean, they made a lot of World Series. 1966, they lost the World Series, but they still made it. So quite a history. All through the 70s, 1974, 1977, 1978. They won. They didn't win, but they made it to the World Series 3 times during the 70s. Then they finally won another World Series in 1981. 1988, they won a World Series. 2017, they lost to the Astros. 2020, they won in 2020, the Rays. And more recently, they just beat Toronto this past year, and the year before that, they beat the Yankees. So a lot of World Series appearances, a lot of World Series victories ever since they moved to L.A.
Yeah, coming to the coast has definitely been it's been successful for the 3 major LA franchises. The Lakers obviously were started in Minneapolis,
Right.
and the Rams come from Cleveland. So maybe that California sunshine
Could be.
Yeah,
What
helps a little bit, but
what year? I mean, like,
well, let me ask you, if you don't mind, what is the perception of LA sports fans back east? Places like I always think of Boston, New York, and Philadelphia as having really diehard, very, very
right.
strong sports traditions and fan bases.
Yeah, it seems like whenever a New York team plays a Los Angeles team, particularly like the Yankees and Dodgers, it seems to be a more popular. I mean, the ratings are through the roof. I know the television networks love it when the Yankees and Dodgers play in the World Series, because the ratings are through the roof. When the Knicks played the Lakers in the early 70s, the ratings were through the roof. So I guess there's always that, that rivalry, the East Coast versus the West Coast, and New York and LA both being big cities with a lot of population. There's just that natural rivalry. So I think, it's definitely piques the interest of the fans whenever LA is playing New York. But what year?
In the book, I talk about
Yep.
the Lakers and the Celtics history too. Throughout the 60s and 70s, how many times did the Lakers end up in the NBA Finals and just could not get past the Celtics? It was heartbreaking.
Oh my goodness. Let's see, I have it written down here. 6 years. I mean, almost every single year it was the Celtics and Lakers. 1961, 1962, 1963, they didn't make it. 1964, they played the Celtics. 1965, 1967, 1968. That's 6 years that they played the Celtics, and they lost every single one. Unbelievable. Do you have do you have any memories of that Lakers team that played the I know some of them you were a little too young, but like towards the late 60s. 67, 68.
The one I remember curiously was the Knicks, the one that where Willis Reed came out and
Yes.
I think he was injured and they hadn't really thought he was going to play, and then he comes out and it was like Game 7, and he comes out and plays and he rallies the Knicks to a victory and they win the series. That was heartbreaking.
Yes.
So I think it was Game 7.
It was Game 7. I remember that vividly because that's right around the time I was about 8. I was 8 years old. So that's about, the age where I really started to become a sports fanatic, and Willis Reed was my favorite player, and so I remember that series vividly. And yeah, I guess after, they finally don't have to play the Celtics. So I'm sure a lot of people in LA thought, okay, this is finally going to be our year. We don't have to play the Celtics. And then they lose to the Knicks. But
the flip side of that argument is, while this is going on, UCLA is on a run that's unparalleled in NCAA history. They win 7 straight titles. John Wooden's, Bruins. I was a distant UCLA fan, but I thought that was remarkable. And if you were a basketball fan in Los Angeles in those days, you probably had to look to the college game to find a little bit more success.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com. Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, a.k.a. the Football History Dude, and I hope that you enjoyed this recent episode presented by the Sports History Network and were able to learn some good old-fashioned sports history knowledge nuggets. I started the Sports History Network back in 2020 with the mission to help podcasters find a community of like-minded sports history nerds, as well as helping aspiring podcasters to start their own shows. We have a little bit over 30 shows on the network right now covering all sorts of sports history, but as far as I'm concerned, we're just at the toothpick in the ocean moment, that can't even figure it out because there's so much more coming. We wanted to create the ultimate headquarters for sports yesteryear, starting with Podcast Network and our website, but we're going to continue to move into other mediums as well. And here's the cool part, because we want you to be part of our team. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, or maybe being a guest on one of our shows, or who knows, maybe even writing an article for us over on the website. Seriously, all you gotta do is reach out to us on the contact page over at sportshistorynetwork.com. You can be as technologically savvy as a Neanderthal tapping on a stone trying to figure out this whole hieroglyphics thing back in the day. Again, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't understand the whole podcast space, we have a production team that can pretty much help you out with doing everything. All you gotta do, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com, head to the contact page, fill it out. That message goes right to me, and I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.